Marcus Thompson wiped the sweat from his forehead as he struggled with the heavy garbage bag. The summer heat in London was unbearable, and his old pickup truck had broken down 3 blocks away from Buckingham Palace. He was already 2 hours behind schedule for his waste collection route, and his boss had warned him about being late again. The 28-year-old sanitation worker had been having the worst month of his life. His girlfriend Sarah had left him for someone with a better job, his landlord was threatening eviction, and his mother needed expensive medical treatment that his meager salary couldn't cover. Every morning felt like climbing a mountain that kept getting steeper. As Marcus dragged the leaking bag down the sidewalk, he noticed the crowds gathering near the palace gates. Tourists were taking pictures, children were pointing excitedly, and everyone seemed to be looking at something he couldn't see from his position. The royal guards were performing their ceremonial duties, standing perfectly still in their iconic red uniforms and tall black hats. The bag suddenly tore open, spilling rotting food and dirty papers across the pristine sidewalk. Marcus cursed under his breath as he tried to gather the mess with his bare hands. The smell was awful, and several tourists stepped away in disgust. He felt humiliated as people stared at him like he was some kind of pest disturbing their perfect royal experience. One particularly well-dressed woman actually took a photo of him cleaning up the mess, probably to show her friends back home how dirty London could be. Marcus felt his face burn with embarrassment and anger. Here he was, working his hardest just to survive while these people treated him like he was invisible or worse, like entertainment. That's when he saw him. Guard Jonathan Mills stood at attention near the palace gates, his face expressionless under the famous bearskin hat. The guard was probably around Marcus's age, maybe younger, but he looked so dignified and respected in his uniform. People took photos with him, admired him, treated him like royalty himself. Something inside Marcus snapped. Why should this guy get all the respect while Marcus was treated like garbage? They were both just working men, but one got honor while the other got shame. The unfairness of it all hit him like a punch to the gut. Without thinking clearly, Marcus grabbed a handful of the spilled trash. His anger clouded his judgment as he walked toward the guard. The crowd around them was thick and security cameras were everywhere, but Marcus didn't care anymore. He was tired of being invisible, tired of being looked down upon. In one impulsive moment that would change everything, Marcus threw the handful of rotting garbage directly at Guard Mills. The crowd gasped in horror as banana peels, coffee grounds, and wet newspapers splattered across the guard's immaculate red uniform. The silence that followed was deafening. Guard Mills didn't move. He didn't flinch, didn't speak, didn't even blink. His training had prepared him for many things, but this was certainly unexpected. The crowd stood frozen, unsure of what would happen next. Marcus immediately realized what he had done, his anger quickly replaced by terror and regret. Security personnel began moving through the crowd, their radios crackling with urgent communications. Marcus knew he was in serious trouble. Assaulting a royal guard was probably a serious crime, and he had just thrown garbage at one of them in front of dozens of witnesses and security cameras. As the reality of his actions sank in, Marcus wanted to run, but his feet felt glued to the ground. He looked at the guard, expecting anger or disgust, but the man's face remained completely neutral. It was somehow worse than if he had shown emotion. Marcus had just destroyed any chance he had of getting his life back on track. The crowd waited for something dramatic to happen. They expected sirens, handcuffs, maybe even the guard breaking his stoic pose to confront Marcus, but nothing happened. Guard Jonathan Mills continued standing at perfect attention, garbage dripping from his uniform as if nothing had occurred at all. Marcus stood there trembling, waiting for security to grab him. He could see officers moving closer through the crowd, speaking into their radios. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might burst. This was it. His life was officially over. He would probably go to prison, lose his job, and disappoint his sick mother even more than he already had. But then something strange happened. The guard's shift was ending, and as protocol demanded, another guard came to replace him. Jonathan Mills executed a perfect ceremonial handover, saluted his replacement, and began walking toward the palace entrance. As he passed Marcus, who was still frozen in shock, he did something completely unexpected. He stopped, not dramatically, not with any visible emotion, but he simply paused next to Marcus. The crowd held its breath. Security officers stopped their approach, unsure of what was happening. Jonathan leaned slightly toward Marcus so quietly that only he could hear, and said 4 words that would haunt Marcus for the rest of the day. "Meet me at 7. Then he continued walking as if nothing had happened. No location was given, no explanation, just those 4 words delivered in a calm, steady voice. Marcus watched in confusion as the guard disappeared into the palace grounds. What did he mean? Meet him where? And why wasn't Marcus being arrested? The security officers finally reached Marcus, but instead of the rough treatment he expected, they simply asked him to move along. One officer, surprisingly gentle, suggested he clean himself up and be more careful with his work equipment. They had seen the whole incident but seemed more concerned with crowd control than punishment. Marcus gathered what remained of his scattered garbage, his mind racing with questions. Why had the guard spoken to him? What did he want? Was this some kind of trap? Maybe the guard was planning to meet him somewhere private to get revenge. Or maybe he was setting up Marcus for a more serious arrest. As Marcus walked back to his broken-down truck, he couldn't stop thinking about the guard's words. There was something in his voice that wasn't angry or threatening. It was almost understanding, but that made no sense. Marcus had just humiliated the man in front of hundreds of people. The rest of Marcus's workday passed in a blur. He managed to get his truck towed to a garage, finished his route on foot, and dealt with his angry supervisor who had heard about the incident through the grapevine. The story was already spreading among the sanitation workers, and Marcus was being called everything from an idiot to a legend. But Marcus couldn't focus on any of that. Those 4 words kept echoing in his head. Meet me at 7. He found himself looking at his watch every few minutes, counting down the hours. Part of him wanted to ignore the mysterious invitation and go home to his small apartment. Part of him was curious enough to take the risk. As 7 o'clock approached, Marcus made a decision that surprised even himself. He would go back to the palace. He had no idea where exactly to meet the guard, but something told him he would figure it out when he got there. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was guilt, or maybe it was just the desperate hope that something good might come from the worst day of his life. Marcus cleaned himself up as best he could, put on his least dirty shirt, and headed back toward Buckingham Palace. The evening crowd was smaller than the daytime tourists, mostly locals walking home from work and a few dedicated royal watchers hoping to catch a glimpse of something interesting. As he approached the area where the incident had happened, Marcus saw a figure in civilian clothes standing near a small cafe across from the palace gates. Even out of uniform, Marcus recognized guard Jonathan Mills immediately. The man who had stood perfectly still while garbage dripped from his uniform was now just a normal-looking guy in jeans and a sweater, holding 2 cups of coffee. Marcus approached slowly, still unsure if this was a good idea. Jonathan looked up and nodded, extending one of the coffee cups toward him. Up close, without the ceremonial uniform and stoic expression, he looked younger than Marcus had expected, maybe 26 or 27, with kind eyes and a tired smile. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Jonathan said, his voice warm and completely different from the formal tone Marcus had heard earlier. "Yeah, I'm Jonathan, by the way, though I suppose you already figured that out." Marcus took the coffee with shaking hands. "I'm Marcus, and I'm really sorry about what happened today. I don't know what came over me. I've been having a rough time, but that's no excuse for what I did to you." Jonathan sat down on a nearby bench and gestured for Marcus to join him. "Rough time, eh? Want to talk about it?" This was not the conversation Marcus had expected. He had prepared himself for anger, threats, maybe even a citizen's arrest. But Jonathan seemed genuinely interested in hearing his story, so Marcus found himself opening up to a complete stranger, telling him about his girlfriend leaving, his mother's illness, his financial struggles, and the constant feeling that life was working against him. "I see people treating me like I'm invisible every day," Marcus explained. "Like my work doesn't matter, like I don't matter. And today, seeing you standing there looking so respected and dignified while I was crawling around in garbage, something just broke inside me. I'm not proud of it." Jonathan listened without judgment, nodding occasionally and asking thoughtful questions. When Marcus finished his story, Jonathan was quiet for a moment, staring at his coffee cup. "You know," Jonathan said finally, 6 months ago, I was sleeping in my car." Marcus looked up in surprise. "What?" "I was homeless," Jonathan continued. Lost my job at a factory, couldn't pay rent, had nowhere to go. I was angry at everyone and everything, just like you are now. I used to walk past these same palace gates every day, looking at the guards and thinking they had it so easy, standing around looking important while I was struggling just to find my next meal. Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. But you're a royal guard. That's a prestigious position. Jonathan laughed softly. It is now. But getting here wasn't easy. One day when I was at my lowest point, I met someone who changed my perspective entirely. An old man who worked as a street sweeper near here. I was sitting right where you're sitting now, feeling sorry for myself and angry at the world. What did he say? He told me something I'll never forget. He said that respect isn't something other people give you because of your uniform or your job title. Respect is something you earn by how you treat others, especially when no one is watching. He said the most respected people he knew were the ones who lifted others up instead of tearing them down. Marcus felt a lump forming in his throat. So what did you do? I started volunteering at a homeless shelter on weekends. Not because I thought it would get me anywhere, but because I realized that helping others helped me feel better about myself. Through the shelter, I met a recruiter who told me about opportunities in the military. The discipline and structure appealed to me, and eventually I worked my way up to this position. Jonathan turned to face Marcus directly. When you threw that garbage at me today, I saw myself 6 months ago. I saw someone who was hurting and angry and looking for someone to blame. I could have had you arrested, but what good would that have done? You'd go to jail, lose your job, and come out even angrier than before. So why didn't you? Marcus asked. Because I think you're better than your worst moment. We all are. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the evening traffic and the few remaining tourists taking pictures of the palace. Marcus felt something shifting inside him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in months. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel completely alone. The shelter where I volunteer, Jonathan said eventually. They're always looking for people to help with their community outreach programs. Nothing fancy, just helping distribute food and supplies to people who need it. You interested? Marcus looked at this man he had wronged just hours earlier, who was now offering him friendship and opportunity instead of punishment. Why would you want to help me after what I did? Jonathan smiled. Because someone helped me when I didn't deserve it either. That's how these things work. One person extends kindness to another, and it creates a ripple effect. Maybe someday you'll do the same for someone else. The following Saturday, Marcus found himself standing outside St. Mary's Community Center, nervous and unsure. He had spent the week thinking about Jonathan's offer, wrestling with doubt and pride. Part of him wondered if this was all some elaborate setup, but something deeper told him to trust this unexpected friendship. Jonathan was already there, along with a small group of volunteers preparing boxes of food and supplies. He introduced Marcus to the team leader, an energetic woman named Linda, who had been running the community outreach program for over 10 years. Jonathan told me you're interested in helping out, Linda said with a welcoming smile. We can always use an extra pair of hands, especially someone who understands what it's like to struggle. Marcus spent that first day quietly observing and helping where he could. He carried boxes, sorted donations, and helped load the van they used to distribute supplies around the city. It was hard work, but different from his regular job. This felt purposeful in a way that surprised him. The real eye-opener came when they made their first stop at a homeless camp under a bridge. Marcus expected to feel uncomfortable or out of place, but instead, he found himself connecting with people who shared similar struggles. There was David, a former electrician who lost everything after an injury. Maria, a single mother trying to keep her children fed while living in her car. Thomas, an elderly man who had outlived his savings and family support. Each person had a story that resonated with Marcus. They weren't lazy or worthless, as he had sometimes heard people say. They were regular people who had faced circumstances beyond their control. Just like him. First time? Asked David as Marcus handed him a bag of groceries. Yeah, Marcus admitted. I'm still figuring out if I belong here. David chuckled. Son, the fact that you're here instead of somewhere else tells me you belong just fine. Most people drive past us like we're invisible. You stopped to help. That comment stayed with Marcus for the rest of the day. For months he had felt invisible himself, but now he was choosing to see people that society often ignored. There was something powerful about that shift in perspective. Over the following weeks, Marcus threw himself into volunteering with increasing enthusiasm. He started showing up during the week after his regular job, helping prepare meals and organize donations. Linda was impressed with his dedication and began giving him more responsibilities. "You have a gift for this," she told him one evening as they cleaned up after serving dinner to 50 homeless individuals. "People trust you because they can tell you understand what they're going through." Meanwhile, Marcus's friendship with Jonathan was growing stronger. They met for coffee regularly, sometimes joined by other volunteers. Jonathan shared more of his own journey, including the setbacks and moments of doubt that had nearly derailed his progress. "The hardest part," Jonathan explained, "was forgiving myself for the anger I had carried around. I had spent so much energy being mad at the world that I forgot to work on actually improving my situation." Marcus understood completely. The anger that had led to his outburst at the palace was still there, but it was transforming into something more constructive. Instead of being angry at successful people, he was becoming motivated to help struggling people. His regular job performance began to improve as well. His supervisor noticed that Marcus was more punctual, more focused, and had a better attitude overall. The truck that had broken down was repaired, and Marcus started taking pride in keeping his route clean and efficient. Even his personal relationships started to change. He called his mother more often, offering emotional support for her medical treatments instead of just worrying about the financial burden. He reached out to a few old friends he had isolated himself from during his worst months. One evening, as Marcus was helping serve dinner at the shelter, he recognized someone in line. It was Tom, a man who worked in the same sanitation department but on a different route. Tom looked embarrassed to be there, clearly struggling with pride and necessity. "Hey, Tom," Marcus said gently as he filled Tom's plate. "Good to see you." Tom looked surprised and ashamed. "Marcus, I didn't expect to see anyone I knew here. I'm just going through a rough patch right now." "No judgment here," Marcus assured him. "We've all been there. If you want to talk about it sometime, I'm a good listener." After the dinner service, Tom approached Marcus privately. His wife had left him, he was behind on rent, and his car had been repossessed. The familiar story of cascading problems that seemed impossible to solve. Marcus found himself offering the same kind of support that Jonathan had given him. He listened without judgment, shared his own struggles, and suggested resources that might help. For the first time since his own crisis began, Marcus felt like he was the one extending a hand instead of needing one. That night, as Marcus walked home through the London streets, he realized something profound had changed. The city looked different somehow, full of possibilities instead of obstacles. The anger that had consumed him for months was still there, but it had transformed into something useful, a fuel for positive action rather than destructive impulses. 3 months after the incident at Buckingham Palace, Marcus's life had transformed in ways he never could have imagined. His dedication to volunteer work had earned him recognition from Linda and the Community Center Board. They offered him a part-time paid position coordinating outreach programs, which would supplement his sanitation job income significantly. The extra money meant Marcus could finally help with his mother's medical bills, and more importantly, he had found a sense of purpose that had been missing from his life. He was no longer just surviving each day. He was making a meaningful difference in other people's lives. Jonathan continued to be a mentor and friend, but their relationship had evolved into more of a partnership. They had started a weekly discussion group for people transitioning out of homelessness, sharing practical advice about finding work, managing finances, and dealing with the emotional challenges of rebuilding a life. "You know," Jonathan said one evening after their group meeting, "I've learned as much from you as you have from me. Watching you transform your anger into compassion has been inspiring." Marcus smiled. "I still get angry sometimes. The difference is that now I channel it toward fixing problems instead of creating more of them." One of their most successful projects was a job placement program that connected homeless individuals with local businesses willing to give people second chances. Marcus used his knowledge of the sanitation industry to help several people find work with waste management companies throughout London. Tom, the co-worker Marcus had encountered at the shelter, had become one of their biggest success stories. With Marcus's help, he had found temporary housing, reconciled with his estranged brother, and was slowly rebuilding his financial stability. Tom now volunteered alongside Marcus on weekends. "I don't know where I'd be without your help," Tom told Marcus one day as they distributed supplies in a rough neighborhood. 6 months ago, I was ready to give up on everything. That's the point, Marcus replied. None of us have to face these challenges alone. There's always someone willing to help if we're brave enough to accept it. The conversation reminded Marcus of how isolated he had felt before meeting Jonathan. The shame and pride that had kept him from seeking help had only made his problems worse. Now he made sure that everyone who came through their programs understood they were part of a community that cared about their success. Marcus's reputation in the volunteer community was growing. Other organizations started asking him to speak at events about his experience with homelessness prevention and community support. At first, he was nervous about public speaking, but Linda encouraged him to share his story. Your journey from that angry moment at the palace to becoming a community leader is exactly what people need to hear, she said. It shows that anyone can change their circumstances with the right support and mindset. His first speaking engagement was at a local church that ran a food bank. Marcus told his story honestly, including the embarrassing details of throwing garbage at Jonathan and the shame he had felt about his circumstances. The audience was captivated by his honesty and the transformation that had followed. After his talk, several people approached him with their own struggles. A woman who had recently lost her job, a man caring for his disabled wife on limited income, a teenager aging out of foster care with nowhere to go. Marcus listened to each story with the same patience and understanding that Jonathan had shown him. The most important thing I learned, Marcus told each person, is that asking for help isn't giving up. It's the first step toward taking control of your life again. By the end of that evening, Marcus had connected 3 people with specific resources and programs that could help them. He felt the same satisfaction he had experienced during his first day volunteering, but magnified by the knowledge that his own story was now helping others find hope. Jonathan was in the audience that night, beaming with pride as he watched his former adversary inspire a room full of people. After the event, they walked together toward the bus stop, reflecting on how much had changed since their coffee meeting months earlier. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I had just had you arrested that day? Jonathan asked. Marcus considered the question seriously. I probably would have lost my job. Maybe gone to prison and come out even angrier than before. I might have ended up living under that bridge instead of volunteering there. That's why I believe in second chances, Jonathan said. Everyone deserves the opportunity to be better than their worst moment. As they waited for their buses to arrive, Marcus felt a deep sense of gratitude for the unexpected friendship that had changed his life. But more than that, he felt excited about the future and the opportunities to help others discover their own potential for positive change. 1 year after the garbage incident, Marcus found himself standing in the same spot outside Buckingham Palace, but everything was different. He was there as a guest of honor at a community service recognition ceremony, not as an angry man struggling with his circumstances. The Mayor of London was presenting awards to individuals who had made significant contributions to addressing homelessness and poverty in the city. Marcus had been nominated by the Community Center for his work in job placement and peer counseling programs that had helped over 200 people find stability. Jonathan was there too, also receiving recognition for his volunteer work and for starting the mentorship program that had helped dozens of young men transition from military service to civilian careers. They stood together in their formal clothes, 2 friends who had met under the most unlikely circumstances. Ladies and gentlemen, the mayor announced, this year's Community Champion Award goes to Marcus Thompson, whose personal transformation from crisis to community leadership exemplifies the power of second chances and the importance of supporting our most vulnerable neighbors. As Marcus walked forward to accept the award, he caught sight of several familiar faces in the crowd. Tom was there, now a supervisor at his sanitation company and a regular volunteer. David from the homeless camp was there too, clean-shaven and wearing the uniform of the construction company where Marcus had helped him find work. Maria, the single mother, had brought her children, who were now in stable housing and doing well in school. But the face that meant the most to Marcus was his mother's. She had traveled from Manchester for the ceremony, her health much improved thanks to the medical care Marcus could now afford to help provide. She beamed with pride as her son accepted the award and spoke about the importance of community support and individual responsibility. A year ago, Marcus said into the microphone, I was the angry man who threw garbage at a royal guard in this exact spot. I was bitter, desperate, and convinced that the world owed me something. I was wrong about that, but I was right about one thing. I did deserve better. We all deserve better. The difference is that better isn't something that happens to us. It's something we create through our choices and our willingness to help each other. He looked directly at Jonathan, who was standing with the other honorees. The guard I disrespected that day had every right to have me arrested. Instead, he chose to see potential in someone at their lowest moment. That choice didn't just change my life. It created a ripple effect that has touched hundreds of other lives. After the ceremony, there was a reception where Marcus met with city officials, charity workers, and other community leaders. Several people approached him about expanding his programs to other areas of London. The conversation was exciting and overwhelming, but Marcus felt ready for the challenge. As the evening wound down, Marcus and Jonathan found themselves walking back toward the palace gates, just as they had done so many times over the past year during their weekly coffee meetings. "Any regrets about not having me arrested?" Marcus asked with a grin. Jonathan laughed. "Just one. I should have bought better coffee that first night. That convenience store stuff was terrible." They stopped at the spot where the original incident had occurred. A new guard was on duty, standing at perfect attention just as Jonathan had done that day. Marcus felt a wave of respect for the young man's discipline and dedication. "You know what the strangest part is?" Marcus said, watching the guard. "I used to look at people in positions like his and feel envious or angry. Now I just feel grateful that there are people willing to serve others, in whatever capacity they can." "That's the real transformation," Jonathan replied. "When we stop seeing other people's success as evidence of our own failure, we can start building our own success on solid ground." As they prepared to part ways for the evening, Marcus pulled out his phone to check his schedule for the following week. He had 3 speaking engagements, 2 job interviews to conduct for the placement program, and a meeting with city planners about expanding services to underserved neighborhoods. His calendar was full, his bank account was stable, and his relationships with family and friends had been rebuilt. But more importantly, Marcus woke up each morning with purpose and went to bed each night knowing he had made a positive difference in the world. "Same time next week?" Jonathan asked, referring to their standing coffee appointment. "Absolutely," Marcus replied. "But this time I'm buying, and we're getting the good stuff." As they walked away in opposite directions, Marcus reflected on the incredible journey that had brought him to this moment. One impulsive act of anger had led to the most important friendship of his life, and a career path he never could have imagined. The lesson wasn't that throwing garbage at people leads to good things, but rather that even our worst moments can become turning points if we're willing to accept help, take responsibility, and dedicate ourselves to lifting others up along the way. Marcus smiled as he disappeared into the London evening, already planning how he could help the next person who found themselves angry, desperate, and convinced that the world owed them something. Because now he knew the secret: we all deserve better, and we all have the power to create it, one act of kindness at a time.